Good morning and welcome to the Delco Show. This is Fiore, Executive Director of Delaware County's Brandywine Conference and Visitors Bureau, and you're listening to the Delco Show brought to you by the Delaware County Chamber of Commerce right here on iRadio Philly. Ladies and gentlemen, the Delco Show is a service that's offered to businesses that are members of the Chamber of Commerce in Delaware County to get the word out about their business, what they do, the people behind the business. We talk about a lot of different things, and if you've listened to this show before, you're well aware of the fact we actually try to have some fun while we're doing it, except probably when we talked, I think we did two shows, Stephen E. Kessner, one about heart transplants and the other one about death. We weren't too funny about that, were we? No, okay. So yeah, humor went out the window on those two shows. But nevertheless, having not for the we tried. Yeah, remember the cemetery one? No. I wanted to use. People were dying to get in, but I couldn't make it fit. So, fortunately, our guest is chuckling, so this could be okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the head of school, the Stratford Friends School, a very interesting school, and basically it's their branding, if you will, or their motto is grow, learn differently, which I find very interesting. We're going to talk about that. I'd like you to welcome the head of school, Dr. Timothy Madigan. Doctor, welcome to the Delco Show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
No, it's our pleasure, really. I found this interesting. We've done other schools, I want to say, somewhat of this ilk in the past, but you've got a different thought process. And what I found fascinating, differently. The differently I found fascinating because I'm going to refer to it as almost like a free-range school. There's no, we know there's parameters, but there's no locked-in times. Classes start here, end here. You do this now, you do this later. It's all really based on what the students need or what the students want, and you build that around. It's almost like having your individual curriculum for each student.
Very close to that. We have a typical daily schedule. But when we work through our curriculum, our students come to us with a whole host of needs, of academic needs. They're identified with some form of a language-based learning difference, or in some cases it's referred to as a learning disability. We don't see it that way. These students are just as capable as their sort of quote-unquote typically developing peers, but they need a different approach to learn, and we provide that. So many schools are sort of cookie cutter. You have math class, reading class, science class, social studies class, and so on. We take what we do and we adapt our program to meet these students' needs. And from my point of view, we do that very well. We have specially designed research-based curricula to do that, particularly in the area of reading.
So it's, I think I just came up with the word as you were talking and explaining that a little bit, Tim. You're structured, but you're structured in a way that suits the student, and the student doesn't have to be pigeonholed into your structure.
Exactly.
Oh, good. I got it right. Stephen, I got something right for a change. Could you expand on that?
Sure, and I like the way you used pigeonholed, and that's the way our students
come
to us.
I'm 2 for 2. Wow. I'm sorry, doctor.
That's all right. They feel that way, and parents feel that way. Where many schools, you either fit or you don't. You fit their program or you don't. We approach it completely differently, and we look at a student individually. We see what their needs are, and if we are able to make adjustments, adapt our program to fit their needs, then they're a good candidate, good fit for us. We are kindergarten through 8th grade school. But our lower school, which amounts to what would in a typical school be kindergarten through 6th grade, we are ungraded. We have a team structure, and the teams are identified by color. We have green, red, orange, and yellow teams. And You notice there's not 7 from kindergarten through 6th grade. There would be 7 grades there. We have the structure we have because our students are grouped by their abilities, but also by their social emotional development. So students in one particular team may overlap in age with another team. There may be a range from, say, 9 to 11 years old, and in another team, you might have a range from 10 to 12 years old. It depends on what their needs are. When we get to the core academics, math, and particularly for us, reading or literacy, the groups are even smaller. So the students move to a team or a group that might have 4 or 5 students in it that all have very similar needs in terms of their literacy development. So there's 1 teacher and 4 or 5 students for literacy.
So, okay, and I saw that, which I thought was really interesting. Everybody's talking these days, with the shortness of funding and everything for whether it's the public schools and the closing of the Catholic elementary schools and everything, the consolidation of high schools. That the big complaint, I guess that I hear a lot is that the classrooms themselves are getting overpopulated, if you will. Where you guys, it looks like you're dealing with 6 students for every teacher.
Right. We are small by design. We enroll right now approximately 70 students from that kindergarten through 8th grade. And that's intentional because our students need more attention. We want to provide that to meet their needs. So when they move on, they're able to achieve, they're able to self-advocate and do the academic pieces that might be more of a challenge had they not had the program that we have on place.
So, okay, I have a grandson, okay, that, if I say so myself, is pretty damn smart, all right? And he finds that things come to him very, very easy. Now, he is in middle school right now, and I think he's in his second. I always forget. The last time I was in high school was so long ago. What is middle school? Is it 5th, 6th, 7th grade?
Yeah, in many places, 5th, 6th, 7th grade.
Okay, so let's go with 5th, 6th, 7th grade. The kid's a great reader. I mean, just knows words and picked it up right in the beginning when he was a little kid. So could he jump in that skill, could he jump to be hanging out or learning or reading with the kids that are a year older than him? You see what
yes, I do. It's a little bit different for our school. Our students have to have a need, a specific diagnosis. So for your grandson, for instance, for something like that to happen, to move up or to be placed in let's stick with a reading group that might be appropriate to that level, there would have to be something done at the school level. There would have to be an identification that says that he would be gifted or have this particular need, and the school would have to adapt for that. For us, we have students who can read just as you described, can read beautifully, very fluently, and see all the punctuation and accentuate when they're supposed to. They read a passage for 2 minutes. You ask them, all right, what did you just read? They cannot comprehend a word. So we have that need, along with students who may take 20 minutes to sound out every single word in that same passage the other student took 2 minutes to read, but they would comprehend every piece of it. They have a decoding need. So we have that type of student. So when we put students together for literacy, we want them to be grouped. Students that may have a comprehension need would be here. Students that might have a decoding need here. That way, they're all learning together. So the teacher, even though we're small, they might have 4 students in the classes. They're not teaching 4 very different needs.
And are these kids tested for this somehow, or do you just kind of observe it?
They're tested before they come to us. We, for students to be enrolled or for us to even look at them as candidates, we need what's called a full-scale psychoeducational evaluation, which indicates to us the needs that they might have academically, but also developmentally, and if there's any behavioral pieces or components to that as well. We do provide a vast program, but like any other institution, we have our limits. There are things that we don't do well, and we're upfront about that. So we work with the students that have these language-based needs, whether it is identified as dyslexia, auditory processing delay, working memory delays, ADD, ADHD, things that in terms of language skill, literacy, interfere with typical learning are what we do really well in a small setting.
Okay, so when we talk about that and you look at that, I'm trying to figure out how do I want to ask this how do I want to ask this next question? Are the parents realizing that the regular school they're in isn't dealing with it properly? And are they recommended to the Stratford Friends School? I mean, how does this work? How does someone end up at the Stratford Friends School?
That's a great question, and you're right. Your thought there is absolutely right. Parents do recognize that there is a need. Oftentimes, it's because one of the parents themselves, growing up, may have had dyslexia. You always have it. It's not like it goes away. But have dealt with that. So they see it in their own children. Or a child might be in school, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, things are going pretty well. When there's a bit of a switch from learning how to do things, learning how to read, for instance, to using that skill to learn something new, parents really see the need. Schools see it. So that's when schools will develop IEPs, individual education programs for students. And when families come to us, generally speaking, they may have had an IEP put in place. The school district or the county IU had done an evaluation, or they had an independent private evaluation done that indicates particular needs. And the program that they're in their school is not performing to meet what is in the IEP. And so families come to us and say, maybe it's my local school district or my other independent school or parochial school is not meeting my child's needs. Can you? Other instances, we have public schools that contact us. Say, here's a particular student. They send the file to us with the parents knowing. We review it, and the school district will say, can you work with the student? And they would place that student with us.
So you have a cooperative program with school districts?
Yes, we have a very nice relationship with many school districts. And we do reach out to them and say, we have this service. If you are willing to place students, to place them with us. Other times it could be a little more contentious, depending on the situation the family and the school district have.
Okay. So they're coming from either the parents are realizing it or the school districts are realizing. How many students do you have?
70.
And it's co-ed?
Yes, co-ed.
So 70. And it's teaching, I'm going to say, the reading, writing, arithmetic?
Yep. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But doing it in a way that addresses the student's needs in a multisensory way. Because everybody learns differently. And a lot of schools now are using sort of differentiation as a way to allow themselves to stand out amongst competition. In this area, in the Delaware Valley, there are many, many different types of schools, many independent schools,
right.
Many competing and all of that. So everyone wants to stand out, and they use now the buzz is differentiation. We've been doing it for nearly 40 years and meeting our students' needs that way. So what we want to do is find out how do our students learn best, and then we take that knowledge and we incorporate it into the classroom, into the lessons. Some students are great visually. So when they're going over decoding words, they might have visual representations and use those. Others are really auditory learners. They don't need the visuals. Others are tactile. They need to touch something. So we have what we call salt boxes. They have salt spread out in them, and it's basically like a pan. And the teacher will write letters on the board, and the students will trace it in the salt so they can see it form as they're doing it. So we take a multisensory approach to find out how best students learn and work with them from that point forward, meeting their needs.
It's almost like, to me, it's almost like the my preference is to listen to a baseball game on the radio rather than the TV.
Exactly.
My visual perception becomes really visionary watching it on, listening to it on the radio.
Right.
You can almost come up with any vision you want. And speaking of a vision, we're going to break for our own little vision. Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Dr. Timothy Madigan, who is the He's called the head of school. We're going to ask that question in the next when we come back. Head of school for the Stratford Friends School, 2 Bishop Hollow Road, Newtown Square, Delaware County, PA. StratfordFriends.org, 610-355-9580. And this is Tori Fiore, Delco Show, iRadio Philly, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Delco Show, ladies and gentlemen. Tori Fiore here. The Delco Show on iRadio Philly, brought to you by the Delaware County Chamber of Commerce. And I just got a cue from Stephen E. Kessner II, who is, I would call him our food maven or food critic, if you will, Tim. Primo Hoagies is our sponsor for lunch every Wednesday at the Delco Show. And Primo's always does a great job. Every week we do the show, they bring over 3 different hoagies, sandwiches, if you will, be it meatballs, tuna, roast beef, roast pork, Italian hoagies, turkey hoagies, all sorts of stuff. And every day it's like going on a little treasure hunt and finding another treasure, right, Stephen? So we're looking forward to the 3 hoagies that were brought today by the wonderful folks at Primo Hoagies on Baltimore Avenue in beautiful Media, Delaware County, PA. So, Primos, thank you once again for your sponsorship to the Delco Show for lunch every Wednesday. Love you guys and gals over there. We're speaking with Dr. Timothy Madigan, who is the head of school for the Stratford Friends School, 2 Bishop Hollow Road, Newtown Square, StratfordFriends.org, 610-355-9580. So don't get confused, folks. It's Stratford, not Stratford, which I'm sure, Tim, you get quite a lot.
All the time.
Yeah, it's Stratford Friends School Stratfordfriends.org. And Tim, I want to go back to, we took the break here, and there's one question I have to ask you before we get back into this about the Stratford Friends School, head of school.
Yes.
Okay. I had a young lady who was the head of school from the Holy Child School, which is, I believe it's in Drexel Hill.
Yes.
And we had her on.
I had a child attend Holy Child.
Okay. So you know from whence I speak.
Yes. And
we had a wonderful conversation and everything, but she was the head of school. I wanted to call her the Grand Poobess, okay, the Queen. There's a dean, there's a principal. What's a head of school? Is that different?
A little bit. It's an independent school or private school expression. Public schools have principals and superintendents. Independent schools, many of them have head of school or headmaster. And
that's the one, yeah.
Right, and an administrative staff and teachers. As the head of school, I report to a board of trustees. We have right now 11 trustees on our board, and they are responsible for the governance of the school. I carry out the vision that they have. The employees at the school, whether it's the administration or the teachers, report to me. Mm-hmm. But underneath, I have a dean of students, a director of enrollment management, director of finance and operations, and a director of development.
Okay.
So and the dean of students is, I think, would be tantamount to a principal, building principal, dealing the first line after the teachers, dealing with disciplinary issues, most of the parent issues, those kinds of things. I'm involved to some degree and often, but the dean of students manages the daily operations in that regard.
Okay. You're originally from Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York, that's right.
Why?
It just so happens that's where I was born. I didn't have much say over that.
Okay, fine. I understand. Well, and so tell me how give me a Reader's Digest version, a quick bio. How did you get out to the Stratford Friends School in Newtown Square?
Okay. Well, I started out my teaching career at a school called the Gow School, which is south of Buffalo, New York. And that's a boarding school.
Anything is south of Buffalo, New York, Dan. Canada might even be south of New York, Dan.
And I don't ever hear jokes like that.
No, I'm sure. You're lucky you're not from South Jersey.
People were convinced we'd never have a snow day because I was from Buffalo. But at that school, the Gauss School is a boarding school for boys, grades 7 through 12, with dyslexia. And that's where I started my teaching career. And that population, I don't like to put it in those terms, but a population of students that I would call not typical, but having the needs that they had or have in every other way, quote unquote, normal developing kids, and opening my eyes up to those types of needs and working with students that learn differently, and I could then teach differently. It opened up a whole new world for me in terms of what I could do as a teacher. Was fascinating to me and a wonderful experience. And when I started there, the headmaster who was at the school at the time, Bill Patterson, and I became friendly, good friends. And I aspired to become a head of school. And he was a wonderful mentor to me. And I continued my education, master's degree, Ph.D. while in English education.
Okay.
Which seems kind of odd, but if I went into special education, I could not do the research that I wanted to do in the area of dyslexia.
Then it's not odd.
So most people wonder, why aren't you special ed? So that was my field of study, my field of research, all the while having the goal of becoming a head of school. And as luck would have it, I was attending a conference, the International Dyslexia Association Conference, and I met who at the time was one of the founders of Stratford Friends School, Sandy Howes. I met her at this conference, and I was in a session for heads of school. Not being a head, I kind of snuck in with a friend of mine.
You're one of those, huh?
I am.
All right.
So a friend of mine who was a current head of the school at the time.
That's what they say about a lot of people from Buffalo, Stephen.
Well, not thinking that I'd have to introduce myself and just kind of sit back quietly, I was comfortable until they said, let's go around and introduce ourselves. So my friend stood up and introduced me for me and said that I was an aspiring head of school. Ah. And so after that, Sandy Howes introduced herself to me, told me she was retiring, and said, why don't you apply for my job? And I was looking at a number of options at that point, but I thought, wow, this looks pretty interesting. And, long story short, my wife and I came down to visit when I was going through the interview process, fell in love with the people at the school, and I was fortunate enough to be selected as the head of school 8 years ago.
Wow. All right, so you're still kind of a rookie down here in Delaware County, right?
Yes.
Now, do you live in Delaware County?
I do. I live in Drexel Hill.
Okay, now you're okay. All right, you went from Buffalo to Drexel Hill. You upgraded, okay? You're doing fine. So you had an affection, I'll call it, for this type of education.
Yes.
And, I mean, what bore that out? Was it a background, an experience, or...
It was experience. When I was an undergraduate student, I went to Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. And as an undergraduate, to graduate, we had to write a senior thesis. They called it a senior comprehensive project. I was also I was an English major, minoring in education, doing my student teaching, and I wanted to take a look at how teacher education programs worked and what skills graduating seniors had when they left high school, literacy skills specifically. And I discovered that students leaving high school were not very well prepared for college, for the workforce, for the military, whatever they were going to do in terms of their literacy skills when they left high school. And that didn't go over very well, by the way, with some of my professors who were indeed teachers. Mm-hmm. But that made me think even more. Growing up, going into public school myself, there were always the students that were in the resource room, the students that were pulled out. And if I looked at typically developing students that were not prepared, what about these other students who were dealing with issues beyond those of us that were in our, quote unquote, again, typical settings? And so that piqued my interest in this population, and I was very fortunate to start my teaching career at the Gauss School. When you think about it, there aren't a lot of schools in the country that do what we do.
Yeah. How long have you been teaching?
I've been in education for over 20 years now.
Okay.
So
you're no rookie.
No.
Yeah.
I look like it, though.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank God for radio. That's so sure. Tim, you go with that. No, really, all right, go with that.
It helps the ego.
You're adorable.
My wife will appreciate that. Thanks.
Oh yeah, no, really, have her call me.
Hey, wait a minute. So knowing that there's that need out there, and knowing that there are so few schools like ours, it became a passion for me, and I thoroughly enjoy what I do. Every day is different, and in a small school, I get to see every student. I know every student every day. I know the parents. The parents are some of the most dedicated and thoughtful and interested people I've ever met. And by interest, I mean they really care about what their children are doing, and they want them to succeed. So we have a really nice relationship with parents too.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Dr. Timothy Madigan, who is the head of school for Stratford Friends School, 2 Bishop Hollow Road, Newtown Square, Delaware County, PA. StratfordFriends.org, 610-355-9580. Check out their website. Give them a call at the number I just gave you. It's a very interesting program they run there. But let me ask a question. What happens after 7th or 8th grade? Because that's as far as you go.
That's right.
What do they do?
All kinds of things. There are other options at the high school level to continue programming like Stratford Friends. There are schools in the area, Delaware Valley Friends School, the Woodland School. Schools like that continue a program very similar to what we do, dealing with students with language-based learning differences. Many of our students go on to those types of schools. Some go on to their local public high school. Maybe they go on to another, again, I hate to use the expression, but typical independent school. It all depends on, again, what their needs are.
Right.
And we work with families currently in our 8th grade, and we work with them over the course of the school year with applications, with visiting schools with and for them to help to find the best fit for their child. And it's very individualized.
Well, but it doesn't sound to me like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're not trying to, you're not as much, I'm going to screw this up, so forgive me, Tim. You're not as much trying to conquer their needs or their, if you will, but aren't you trying to get them to adapt or adjust to their needs on an individual basis?
That's a good way to put it. People often come to us and they have a child. This is a generalized example. Family might come to us, child's in 3rd grade, not reading at a 3rd grade level. And they say, our child should be reading at a 3rd grade level because they're in 3rd grade. Well, in an idealized world, yes. But the reality is in that child's typical class, there are students that are on the 3rd grade level. There are students that are on a kindergarten level. There are students that are on an 8th grade level. They're all over the map. And so that should be question kind of goes out the window a little bit. And when we work with our students, you don't cure their needs. They're not broken and they're not to be fixed. But they do learn to adapt. They learn to cope. They learn strategies and skills from us on how to continue to develop appropriately. There are students that get to grade level. There are students that get beyond grade level. And there are those that are always going to have a little bit more of a struggle. But for them, they understand it now. They get what their needs are, and they can work with it that way. But part of that education is not the child, but also the parents.
Okay. I'm going to give this in rapid fire. We only got a couple of minutes left, but I know there's a bunch of other questions. So give me a yes or no, or 25 words or less, or 12 words or less, whatever the case may be. You have extracurricular activities. You got basketball.
We do. Basketball, soccer. We have clubs after school. Yes.
Beautiful. Tuition affordable?
Depends who you ask. Tuition at a small school like ours with the program we had is very expensive. We're in the neighborhood of $36,000 a year.
Okay. Financial aid?
Financial aid is available.
Okay. If you have relationships with the school districts, if you will, is any of that funding covered by the school districts?
Yes. Presently, about 48% of our students are funded by their local district.
Okay. I got one last question because we're into 30 seconds left. what do people need to take from this conversation? What's the important thing people should know about Stratford Friends?
They need to know that Stratford Friends is here, that there are schools like us available to them to meet their students' needs, and we adapt to those needs to provide the best education possible so their children can be successful moving on.
Dr. Well put. Ladies and gentlemen, Stratford Friends School, Head of School, Dr. Timothy Madigan. I'm Tori Fiore. This is the Delco Show, and you're listening to it on iRadio Philly. See you next week.